Is Rolex collapsing? Are we witnessing the end of an era? Rolex just shocked the whole world, and dealers don't know what to do. Let us explain. 50 years. That's how long a jeweler in Stuttgart, Germany, had sold Rolex watches. Then one day, in 2025, Rolex terminated their authorization. No warning, no explanation, no chance to fix whatever was supposedly wrong. And that action killed this jeweler's company. And he's not alone. Across Germany, 40 authorized Rolex dealers are losing their licenses by the end of 2026. In the United States, long-standing family jewelers, some who've sold Rolex since the 70s, are getting terminated. The same thing is happening in Hong Kong. Rolex boutiques are pulling out of historically expensive retail streets. Are they going bankrupt? The truth is way more complicated, and today we're breaking down exactly what's happening, why it's happening, and what it means for anyone trying to buy a Rolex in 2026 and beyond. How we got here. Before we talk about store closures, we need to understand the market chaos that led to this moment. Because everything Rolex is doing right now, every dealer they're cutting, every store they're closing, every strategy they're implementing, makes sense only if you understand what happened in 2021 and 2022. It seems Rolex will always be under the shadow. 2020, COVID-19 shuts down the world. People are stuck at home, stimulus checks arrive, stock markets boom, crypto explodes. Everyone suddenly has money and nowhere to spend it. So they buy watches. Rolex demand goes absolutely insane. Waitlist that used to be 6 months stretched to 2 years. Then 3, then 5. Authorized dealers have empty display cases with exhibition-only signs on every popular model. The secondary marketplaces like Chrono24 and Bob's Watches sees prices skyrocket 50 to 150% above retail. A steel Submariner with a retail price of $9,000, selling for $17,000 on the gray market. A steel Daytona retailing at $15,000, $45,000 if you wanted one today. Flippers made fortunes. People who'd never cared about watches suddenly viewed Rolexes as investment vehicles. Social media influencers posed with Daytonas they'd bought purely to resell. The entire market became speculation-driven chaos. Authorized dealers couldn't keep anything in stock. Whatever watches Rolex shipped sold instantly, often to the wrong buyers. Flippers built relationships with salespeople, bought watches at retail, walked across the street to gray market dealers, and pocketed $20,000 profits. The system was broken. Then reality hit. In 2023, crypto crashed and stock markets wobbled. Interest rates rise and inflation squeezes discretionary spending. And suddenly, those $45,000 Daytonas don't look like such great investments anymore. The secondary market collapsed. Not entirely. Rolex values didn't crash to retail, but prices dropped 10 to 30% from peaks. A Submariner that hit $20,000 in 2022, back down to $14,000 by late 2024. Wait lists started shrinking. The 2-year wait for a Submariner? Down to 6 months, then 3 months. Some authorized dealers reported selling Submariners with just 2-week waits by early 2025. Flippers disappeared. The quick profit game was over. Gray market dealers got stuck with expensive inventory nobody wanted at inflated prices. The watch market normalized. Not back to pre-pandemic levels. Rolex values still traded above retail for hyped models, but the insanity ended. For 3 years, Rolex watched their authorized dealers struggle with empty cases. They watched flippers exploit the system. They watched their brand become associated with speculation instead of craftsmanship. And they decided, enough. The market correction gave Rolex breathing room to restructure. With demand normalizing and inventory improving, they could finally implement the retail strategy they'd been planning for years. That strategy? Take control. So, the market cooled, demand normalized, inventory improved, but instead of celebrating, Rolex started sending termination letters to dealers who'd been loyal partners for decades. What's really going on? let's talk about the massive consolidation that's reshaping how Rolex is sold. The Great Consolidation. Rolex takes control. Here's what most people miss when they see headlines about Rolex. Rolex doesn't own most of those stores. They never did. Rolex operates through a network of authorized dealers and independent jewelers who have contracts to sell Rolex watches. Think of your local family-owned jewelry store that also carries Omega, Tag Heuer, and maybe Cartier. That's an authorized dealer. For decades, this model worked perfectly. Rolex focused on making watches. Dealers focused on selling them. Rolex got global distribution without the headache of running retail. Dealers got the prestige and profit margins of carrying the world's most desired watch brand. But in 2025, Rolex is fundamentally changing this relationship. And for many small dealers, that change is fatal. The strategy is simple. Rolex is cutting the total number of authorized dealers while concentrating inventory in larger, more premium locations. So, Rolex is terminating contracts with smaller multi-brand jewelers, ending relationships with dealers in secondary locations, favoring flagship boutiques in major cities, and prioritizing dealers who can offer elevated Rolex-exclusive experiences. The numbers? Way more brutal than you think. In Germany, approximately 40 dealer locations will lose Rolex authorization by the end of 2026. In the United States, dozens of family jewelers terminated in the past 2 years. In the UK, there has been major consolidation since 2012, with brands like Ernest Jones, Fraser Hart, and Wempe all losing Rolex. Industry analysts estimate Rolex has terminated or chosen not to renew 10 to 15% of its global authorized dealer network since 2020. That's not hundreds of stores in 1 year, but it's a steady, relentless consolidation that's been happening for half a decade. Let us tell you some real stories, because the human cost of this strategy is significant. Hauser's Jewelers in Newport News, Virginia has been run by Brad Hart and his wife Amy. They have been Rolex authorized dealers since 1977, 46 years. They'd built their entire identity around being a Rolex dealer. In December, a few years ago, Brad and Amy took a post-Christmas vacation. They're celebrating. Rolex sales had been incredible. They're proud of representing the brand. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Authorization terminated. And just like that, years of relationship ruined. It was a gut punch, Brad told National Jeweler. Rolex had even told us it was an honor for them to be in a family business like ours. And then, nothing. The nearest Rolex dealer? Over an hour away. In Saxon's Fine Jewelers, Bend, Oregon, Natasha Henderson followed every Rolex rule to the letter. Her store represented the brand impeccably. They were even in discussions with their Rolex rep about a planned store remodel specifically for the Rolex section. Then one day, Natasha got an email from a private server, not even an official Rolex letterhead, telling her she was losing the brand. She thought it was a scam. She called Rolex to confirm. It wasn't a scam. I'm a small store, she said. What they did almost put me out of business. They just invited me to a training in February, and then I got the termination letter in April. The nearest Rolex dealer? 2.5 hours away. A Stuttgart jeweler in Germany was the ultimate Rolex person. The person had spent 50 years as an authorized dealer. Half a century. 3 generations of family ownership. The owner told the Frankfurter Allgemeine newspaper that losing Rolex was the final decision that forced him to close his business entirely. No warnings, no violations, just a letter saying the relationship was over. Here's what's fascinating. None of these dealers broke rules. They weren't selling to flippers. They weren't trans-shipping watches to gray market dealers. They weren't misrepresenting the brand. The reasons for termination weren't about behavior. They were about location. As one industry consultant wrote in National Jeweler, the historical justifications that drove previous separations, not following rules, misrepresenting the brand, creative pricing, trans-shipping have given way to something decidedly less tangible, less actionable, and that appears to the untrained eye to be your store's address. Translation: Rolex is culling dealers based on geography and prestige, not performance. Small-town jewelers? Gone. Multi-brand stores in secondary malls? Gone. Family businesses that can't afford million-dollar Rolex-exclusive renovations? Gone. The consolidation isn't about punishment. It's about control. So Rolex is cutting small dealers and consolidating around premium locations. But there's another massive piece to this puzzle, one that explains why Rolex suddenly has the power to reshape their entire retail network. In 2023, they made the biggest acquisition in their 100-year history. Let's talk about Bucherer. The Bucherer bombshell. Rolex buys its biggest retailer. In August 2023, the watch industry woke up to shocking news. Rolex had acquired Bucherer. Not partnered with, not invested in, acquired. As in, Rolex now owns the world's largest retailer of Rolex watches. This was seismic. Rolex had never owned retail at this scale before. They'd always maintained arm's-length relationships with dealers, preserving independence and avoiding the complexity of running stores. But in one move, Rolex took control of over 100 retail locations across Europe and the United States. Bucherer was a family-owned Swiss watch and jewelry retailer founded in 1888. They operated luxury stores in prime locations across Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and other European countries. In 2018, they acquired Tourneau, the largest luxury watch retailer in the United States, giving them 33 stores in America. More importantly, Bucherer and Rolex share a deep history. Bucherer became a Rolex authorized dealer in 1924, just 19 years after Rolex was founded. For a century, the two companies grew together. Jörg Bucherer, the third-generation owner who ran the company until 2023, was the last person still alive who had personally known and worked with Hans Wilsdorf, Rolex's founder. When Jörg Bucherer decided to sell the company at age 87, Rolex stepped in. The acquisition price was never disclosed, but industry estimates put it in the billions. Owning Bucherer gives Rolex something they've never had before: direct control over a significant chunk of their retail distribution. Previously, 92% of Rolex sales happened through independent authorized dealers. Rolex had influence but not control. They could set retail prices and allocate inventory, but they couldn't dictate every aspect of the customer experience. Now, Bucherer stores, over 100 of them, operate as Rolex-owned boutiques. Rolex controls the staffing, the merchandising, the customer service, the repairs, everything. This also gives Rolex a testing ground. Want to try a new display concept? Test it in Bucherer stores first. Want to experiment with pricing or inventory allocation? Do it through Bucherer and see how customers respond. Most importantly, it shifts leverage. Independent dealers now compete with Rolex's own stores for inventory allocation. Guess who wins that battle? But the Bucherer acquisition came with baggage. A watch brand called Carl F. Bucherer, CFB. Founded in 1888, 17 years before Rolex, CFB was Jörg Bucherer's personal passion project. The brand manufactured its own movements, used proprietary peripheral rotor technology, and competed in the haute horlogerie space with complications like tourbillons and minute repeaters. The problem? Carl F. Bucherer never made money. Despite respectable sales, 80 to 100 million Swiss francs in peak years, the brand operated at a loss for decades. Industry estimates suggest the Bucherer family poured 250 million Swiss francs into CFB over its lifetime just to keep it afloat. Why did it survive? Because Jörg Bucherer loved it. It was his baby, and as long as he owned the company, nobody could tell him to shut it down. Then Rolex bought Bucherer, and 3 months later, Jörg Bucherer passed away at age 87. With the founder gone and Rolex analyzing the books, the verdict was swift and, of course, brutal. On the 7th of February 2025, Swiss business publication Bilanz broke the news. Rolex is shutting down Carl F. Bucherer entirely. That morning, Approximately 100 CFB employees were called into meetings and told the brand was being discontinued. Boutiques would close. Inventory in 250 retail locations worldwide, including 50 Bucherer and Tourneau stores, would be cleared out and replaced with other brands. Neither Rolex nor Bucherer issued official statements. Rolex referred questions to Bucherer. Bucherer dismissed reports as rumors. But the rumors were true. Within weeks, Karl F. Bucherer boutiques started closing. The brand's website went dark. Production at the Lengnau facility near Biel, Switzerland, ceased. Rolex offered many employees positions at their new factory in Bulle. The CFB death for watch enthusiasts looks disappointing, but from a business perspective, the decision makes perfect sense. Rolex already has Tudor as their secondary brand. Tudor is profitable, growing, and well-positioned in the $5,000 to $1,000 to $10,000 luxury sports watch segment. Karl F. Bucherer competed in the $10,000 to $50,000 hot watch space, closer to where Rolex itself operates. It created internal competition without adding value. Plus, CFB was a money pit. Rolex is owned by the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation, a charitable trust that reinvests profits into the company and philanthropic causes. Subsidizing a perennially unprofitable watch brand doesn't serve either mission. The cold calculation: CFB generated 80 to 100 million in revenue, but lost money every year. That's dead weight. Cut it and bury it far deep into the earth. Maybe Bucherer also saw this coming, and so they did something. They were so desperate to move CFB inventory that they bundled it with Rolex. Want to buy a steel Daytona? The most hyped, waitlisted Rolex model? Some Bucherer stores required you to also buy a Karl F. Bucherer watch. Think about that. Customers who'd waited years for a Daytona were forced to buy a second watch they didn't want just to get the one they'd been dreaming about. This was suspicious, but it generally goes in line with how authorized dealers operated in the market. Yet, even with that strategy, literally forcing people to buy CFB, the brand still couldn't turn a profit. How unexciting could they be that Rolex wasn't even enough motivation to buy them? Whatever did CFB do wrong? Today, pre-owned Karl F. Bucherer watches trade at discounts up to 90%. A watch that retailed for $15,000, selling for $1,500 on the secondary market. That's not a watch brand. That's a cautionary tale. A film even more horrifying than it. The CFB shutdown eliminates 250 retail locations worldwide where the brand was sold. That includes boutiques and sections within Bucherer and Tourneau stores. So when headlines scream Rolex closing hundreds of stores, some are referring to these CFB retail points disappearing. Rolex stores, Bucherer locations selling Rolex, remain open. In fact, they're expanding, although this was at the expense of independent dealers. So Rolex bought Bucherer, killed Karl F. Bucherer, and started terminating independent dealers. The picture is getting clearer. But where's all this leading? What's Rolex actually building? The answer: flagship megastores that will change luxury retail forever. Here's what we mean. The flagship strategy: bigger, fewer, better. Rolex isn't just closing stores. They're also opening some of the largest luxury watch boutiques ever built. The strategy is to consolidate around flagship locations in global capitals, stores so impressive, so perfectly curated, that they become destinations themselves. On the 13th of March 2025, Rolex opened a 4-story flagship boutique on Old Bond Street in London, one of the most expensive retail streets in the world. This isn't a store, it's a cathedral to the crown. Developed in partnership with Watches of Switzerland Group, the boutique spans multiple floors dedicated entirely to Rolex. Every model line has its own section: private consultation rooms, in-house service centers, exclusive experiences you can't get anywhere else. The message is, if you want the full Rolex experience, this is where you come. But here's the cost. Multiple, smaller authorized dealers in London lost Rolex or saw their allocations slashed to make this flagship possible. As watch dealer and YouTuber Roman Sharf pointed out, Several Rolex retailers may have to close their Rolex sections because of this new boutique. Rolex's inventory is not endless. If one store gets 100 Submariners per year, that's 100 Submariners not going to smaller dealers. But Rolex isn't slowing down. They have this ambition to dominate. It's why they are building this mega factory in Bulle, Switzerland. We talked about that in our other videos. You should check them out too. Rolex is building its largest flagship in the Western world on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, expected to open in 2027. Details are scarce, but industry insiders expect it to rival or exceed the London boutique in scale. Multiple floors, hundreds of watches, exclusive models available nowhere else. Again, the trade-off. Smaller New York area dealers are being consolidated or terminated to funnel inventory toward this flagship. Interestingly, Rolex and other luxury brands have pulled back from some historically expensive retail streets in Hong Kong and other Asian cities. Why? Shifting economic conditions. Hong Kong's retail sector has struggled post-pandemic. Rents on streets like Russell Street remain astronomical, but foot traffic hasn't recovered. So Rolex is consolidating into mall-based boutiques and flagship locations in prime shopping districts, rather than paying premium rents for standalone street-level stores that don't generate equivalent traffic. This is retail optimization, not collapse. So, from a dealer perspective, is Rolex doing a brutal squeeze by becoming players, or is there an opportunity? For large, premium authorized dealers like Watches of Switzerland Group, WOSG, Rolex's flagship strategy is a goldmine. WOSG now operates multiple Rolex boutiques in London, New York, and other major cities. Their UK Rolex turnover rose from £595 million in 2017 to 2018 to £859 million in 2024 to 2025, a 44% increase. They're winning the consolidation game. More inventory, better locations, closer partnerships with Rolex. But for small family jewelers, they're getting squeezed out. They can't compete with multi-million-dollar boutiques. They can't offer Rolex-exclusive experiences. They can't justify the costs Rolex now demands. The watch industry is divided into two branches. There are winners and losers, with very little middle ground. Flagships are opening. Small dealers are closing. Rolex owns Boucherer. But why? What's the end game here? What's Rolex really trying to accomplish with this massive restructuring? Let's talk about the three strategic goals driving everything. The three goals. Why Rolex is doing this. Rolex doesn't make impulsive decisions. Every move, buying Boucherer, terminating dealers, building flagships, serves a carefully calculated strategy. Three goals drive everything. Goal number 1. Protect brand exclusivity. Rolex's entire value proposition is exclusivity. The moment Rolex becomes common, it stops being Rolex. Think about it. If you could walk into any jewelry store in America and buy any Rolex model off the shelf, no waitlist, no purchase history required, would they still command the same prestige? Probably not. Scarcity creates desirability. Waitlists create hype. The harder something is to get, the more people want it. Rolex learned this accidentally during the pandemic. When authorized dealers had empty cases, demand exploded. People wanted what they couldn't have. Now Rolex is engineering that scarcity intentionally. By reducing the number of authorized dealers, Rolex concentrates demand at fewer points of sale. Each remaining dealer feels more exclusive. Getting a call from your authorized dealer feels like winning a lottery. It's scarcity by design, but is it right? The second goal is that Rolex wants to control the customer experience. For decades, Rolex had limited control over how their watches were sold. Sure, they set standards. They required dealers to maintain certain displays, follow pricing guidelines, and represent the brand professionally. But ultimately, the customer experience varied wildly. Some authorized dealers had incredible, knowledgeable staff, beautiful stores, white glove service. Others were mediocre, pushy salespeople, cluttered displays, treating Rolex like just another product. Rolex couldn't do much about it. Fire one bad dealer, 10 customers lose access. But now, with flagship boutiques and owned retail, Rolex controls the experience directly. They train every employee, they design every display, they curate every interaction. Apple figured this out years ago with Apple stores. Rather than selling iPhones through carrier stores where employees might steer you to Samsung, Apple opened their own stores where every interaction reinforces the brand. Rolex is doing the same thing, and it's working. This brings us to goal number 3: combat the gray market. The gray market, unauthorized dealers buying watches from customers or flippers and reselling them at premiums, has plagued Rolex for decades. During the pandemic, it got out of control. Authorized dealers sold watches to customers, who immediately flipped them to gray market dealers for massive profits. Rolex got retail. The flipper pocketed the spread. The gray dealer marked it up even higher. Rolex made money once. Everyone else made money multiple times off Rolex's brand equity. That had to stop. By consolidating around fewer, more controllable dealers, Rolex can monitor where watches go. Flagship boutiques have stricter customer vetting. Boucherer stores, owned by Rolex, have zero incentive to sell to flippers. The certified pre-owned program also helps. By entering the secondary market officially, Rolex provides a legitimate alternative to gray dealers. CPO watches come with authentication, warranty, and Rolex's seal of approval, all while giving Rolex another revenue stream. Slowly, methodically, Rolex is squeezing the gray market out of existence. So, those are the goals: exclusivity, control, and fighting gray market dealers. But here's the question everyone's asking: is this strategy working? Or is Rolex making a catastrophic mistake that will backfire spectacularly? Let's look at what the CEO himself said. What Rolex's CEO actually said and what it means. In November 2025, at the Dubai Watch Week, Rolex CEO Jean-Frédéric Dufour takes the stage for a rare keynote address. Rolex CEOs almost never speak publicly. The brand operates through press releases and carefully controlled messaging. So when Dufour speaks, the watch industry listens. And what he said was fascinating. "We won't expand retail beyond Boucherer." Dufour explicitly stated that Rolex will not significantly expand its own retail network beyond what they acquired with Boucherer. "It's a very small part of our distribution network," he said. "We don't have any intention to expand further than that." Translation: buying Boucherer was a one-off move. Rolex isn't trying to own all retail. They're not building a chain of hundreds of Rolex-only stores worldwide. The wholesale model, selling through independent authorized dealers, will remain the primary channel. 92% of Rolex sales still happen through partners like Watches of Switzerland Group, Siddiqui Holding, and Family Jewelers. Boucherer represents only 8% of Rolex's global distribution. So when people panic about Rolex going direct to consumer and killing all dealers, that's not what's happening. Rolex needs its dealer network. Running retail at scale is incredibly difficult, and Dufour admitted as much. The automotive sector is a cautionary tale. Dufour warned that luxury brands risk losing customer relationships if they become too transactional and digital. He pointed to the automotive industry as an example. Car companies pushed digital sales, reduced in-person experiences, and weakened dealer relationships. The result? Customers became less loyal. Brands became interchangeable. An industry without long-term client relationships is an industry at risk, Dufour said. His message is that Rolex values the personal relationships that authorized dealers build with customers. The local jeweler who knows your family, who calls when your watch comes in, who provides service for decades, that matters. Rolex doesn't want to lose that by going fully direct to consumer. So if Rolex isn't trying to own all retail, and if they value dealer relationships, why are they terminating so many dealers? Because there's a difference between valuing the concept of dealer partnerships and valuing every specific dealer. Rolex wants fewer, better partners. Dealers who can invest in elevated experiences. Dealers in premium locations. Dealers with resources to build Rolex-exclusive boutiques. Small-town jewelers who can't afford million-dollar renovations. They're not part of the future vision. It's selective partnership, not wholesale abandonment. So as you can see, Rolex isn't in trouble. What's actually happening is Karl F. Bucherer, a watch brand Rolex acquired and then killed, had 250 retail points worldwide. Those are closing. That's not Rolex stores closing. Rolex is terminating roughly 10 to 15% of its authorized dealer network over several years, consolidating around premium partners. That's dozens of dealers, not hundreds of Rolex stores. Rolex is opening flagship megastores in major cities while closing or reducing presence in secondary locations. That's strategic repositioning, not retreat. This isn't collapse. It's a calculated consolidation. At least, that's what Rolex thinks. The winners are one, large, premium dealers. Watches of Switzerland Group, Sedeki Holding, and similar upscale multi-location retailers are getting more inventory, better allocations, and closer partnerships with Rolex. 2. Rolex-owned Bucherer. Over 100 stores worldwide, now directly controlled by Rolex, providing testing grounds for new strategies and guaranteed premium experiences. 3. Flagship boutiques. Massive stores in London, New York, and other capitals becoming destinations that reinforce Rolex's luxury positioning. And 4. Customers in major cities. Better access. Better experiences. More inventory at flagship locations. The losers are 1. Small family jewelers. Losing Rolex authorization with no clear explanation, often forcing business closures or major pivots. 2. Customers in secondary markets. Fewer local dealers means longer drives to buy or service Rolex watches. 3. Karl F. Bucherer fans. A 137-year-old brand with unique technology, gone forever. And 4. Gray market dealers. Squeezed by CPO program and tighter dealer controls. So, what happens next? Over the next 3 to 5 years, expect continued dealer consolidation, probably another 5 to 10% reduction globally. More flagship boutiques opening in major cities and Bucherer network stabilizing around 100 to 110 locations. Also, the CPO program expanding significantly, and lastly, waitlists continuing to shorten for non-hyped models as production increases. Rolex isn't dying. They're evolving into a more vertically integrated luxury brand with tighter control over distribution, retail experience, and brand positioning. Whether that's good for customers depends entirely on where you live and which dealers survive the cull. So here's where we are. The headlines scream, Rolex is closing hundreds of stores. And technically, if you count Karl F. Bucherer, retail points plus terminated, authorized dealers, that number approaches or exceeds 100 over the past few years. But context matters. Rolex isn't closing Rolex stores. They're killing a separate brand they inherited, terminating underperforming dealer relationships and consolidating around premium locations. This is strategic repositioning for long-term dominance, not panic-driven cost-cutting during decline. The Rolex you'll encounter in 2026 and beyond will be harder to buy in small towns, easier to buy in major cities with flagships, more controlled in terms of customer experience, more expensive and more exclusive, because fewer dealers equals exclusivity. For collectors, this means adapting, building relationships with the dealers who survive, traveling to flagship boutiques, considering certified pre-owned, accepting that the days of walking into any jewelry store and finding Rolex are over, maybe forever. For Rolex, this strategy cements their position as the most desired luxury watch brand in the world. Exclusivity drives demand. Control ensures quality. Flagship experiences reinforce prestige. Love it or hate it, Rolex is reshaping luxury watch retail in their image, and the rest of the industry will spend the next decade trying to copy them. So what do you think? Is Rolex's consolidation strategy brilliant or short-sighted? Will flagship boutiques enhance the brand or alienate customers in smaller markets? Have you been affected by dealer closures in your area? And if you found this breakdown valuable, like this video and hit subscribe. We're tracking every move in the luxury watch world as it happens. See you in the next one.